That rifle was a point of contention for Jeff and I, actually, because he hand carried that gun back to Proof Research and turned it back in, and it was actually gifted to me. So, so that gun ends up being the gun on this hunt. You know,
3 bulls down in camp,
Yeah.
and this bull was by far the biggest. Like, this was incredible.
As we were coming back into land to grab the moose, we couldn't land. The wind was bad. We couldn't even. It was like the turbulence was coming through that river and over this tree. So
And I do miss pulling the trigger on ripping Hellfires and 2.75 inch rockets and 30 millimeter. But it was the most, lethal weapons platform at that time on the battlefield. But you are getting shot back at. That does make a difference. It makes a huge difference sticking your head in it. And now I thought you were screwing with me because of the day before. Yeah. And you're like, hey, there's a bull out here. Come on. There's a bull out here. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, because you guys wouldn't. Hey, everybody, I'm Troy Sessions here on Troy Sessions Podcast. And I'm here with the infamous Butch Whiting of Kryptek.
Hey, Troy.
Yeah, hey man, thanks for coming on the show. And
I wouldn't miss it, dude. One of the most epic hunts that I've ever been on in my life. To go back and revisit is kind of cool, right? This hunt never got the attention at the time. There wasn't all these social media platforms, but what an incredible experience.
Yeah, it was the most favorite hunt I've ever been on so many different levels and reasons. And I think one of the biggest being it was just a hunt with friends, no expectations, in a wilderness condition and area, and we just had fun and put into practice what we knew, and the bulls come in.
Did they come in? You just like unbelievable. You can't script it any better. It was remarkable. It was remarkable.
So, as you know, Jeff and I went in first, and we nailed it. He nailed that big old 71.5 inch bull, and we had to go get gas. And as we were coming back into land to grab the moose, we couldn't land. The wind was bad. We couldn't even. It was like the turbulence was coming through that river and over this tree so bad it wasn't a safe landing. So we left camp and everything and went straight home to Fairbanks. And somewhere along the way, or after landing, you and Jeff got to talking, and you were in town. How'd that work?
Yeah.
Transpire?
From what I recall, I was supposed to be in Kotzebue and actually hunting in the DeLong mountain range on a grizzly bear, an interior grizzly bear hunt. And I had been weathered in to get into Kotzebue. And Jeff was super excited. He had just shot a giant bull, so he was excited about telling me about that. And then you guys hadn't gotten the bull completely out at that time, from what I recall. So we had to go back in to pack it out. So he's like, hey, if you want to come up and if you got a few days and help me pack this bull out, there's some other bulls around. And so he invited me to go on it. And I was already scheduled to be out. And I think I had probably a week before I was going to try to get back into Kotzebue. So I was like, yeah, I'll jump on that, and had all my gear ready to go and everything ready to go. We were in close comms for a number of reasons. One, Jeff was the pastor of my church up there, and your church too, as I recall. Yep. But he also was shooting a Proof Research rifle that they had sent to me.
Proof had TAC 2.
Yeah, Proof had just gotten into that market, and that was one of the very first Proof rifles ever out of the factory. And so we had selected a .308 caliber because that caliber lent itself to the Alaska CERT team. And as you recall, Jeff was working on WhisperTech suppressors.
He was.
And so when they asked me, what caliber do you want? I'd said, well, let's get a .308 because the guys at that time, the CERT, which is, the equivalent to a SWAT team, but Alaska calls them CERT team, Special Emergency Reaction Team, was shooting .308s. And so we had that rifle that was up there, and that was another connection point with Jeff and I, was that Proof rifle. And so he had just smoked an absolute giant bull with that rifle. And I think that's actually where the conversation kind of started. And then it led into, hey, what are you doing? And then the next thing I know,
I got it on video too with that rifle.
Right
when he took it.
Yeah. That rifle was a point of contention for Jeff and I, actually, because he hand carried that gun back to Proof Research and turned it back in, and it was actually gifted to me. So, that gun ends up being the gun on this hunt, but that's where it started. And, what an audible, you don't plan on this hunt. I wasn't planning on going on this hunt, and then I get asked to go. And I think part of it was to help pack out the moose as well. If you recall, we had to go across the river in the raft and then hike up and go to where the moose was shot. But that's a daunting task no matter what. One guy, two guys, three guys, the more guys, the better.
It appears to me that some large carnivore has taken its back straps. Yeah, oh, that's right. That was us. That was us.
Yeah, even though it was across the river and only 150 yards, maybe 200 yards from camp, it's still a really tough hike out of there and pack job.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, getting it back safely across the river was a task in itself. As you recall, the water was super deep and a big cut bank on that side. We had to drop down that cut bank to get into the raft. And it was like, if you went, getting the meat down, getting yourself down and not going into the river with waders on to fill up and drown, and I don't know how deep it was there, but it was over your head. And, it was high adventure for sure. So I got the phone call, and Jeff was like, yeah, come on up. We're going to try to get back in. I don't know if it was the next day or the day after, but it was shortly thereafter. And like I said, I was all loaded up and ready to go, and just went over and got in the plane and we flew up and started the hunt. But the first day in, we went and packed that moose out, got everything back to camp, got settled. And that's when the adventure had already started, but then the adventure really started.
It's probably pretty neat when you arrive in camp and you already have a 70-inch bull to go pack out of the field. And your hunt's just beginning at that point.
That was the other thing. I mean, to put things in perspective, for guys that aren't from Alaska or spent any time up there, 60-inch bull is like the benchmark. That's what everybody wants to kill. And they don't talk about the overall gross score, Boone and Crockett. They talk about just a 60-inch bull is shooting the equivalent to a 200-inch mule deer
or 40-inch ram
or a 400-inch bull. That's like a big deal.
It is.
And quite frankly, I mean, Troy Sessions, had a pretty significant reputation for year over year killing bulls that were over 60 inches, but 70 inches is unheard of, right? Very rare, extremely rare.
I mean, you can't even go out in the field and say, I'm going to get a 70-inch bull. I'm going to go for nothing less than 60 and hope for bigger.
Right. Yeah. So that's how it started there.
That's how it started, and to be honest here, I hadn't even, up to that point, I haven't even harvested a 70-inch bull until that hunt. So it was, we'll save that for later, but that was going to be my first 70-inch bull on this hunt. So that first day we got the bull back, we are like anybody else first day in camp. Of course, it was mine second or third day in camp with me and Jeff, and then you come in as your first day, but it felt like the first day all over again. And then we're looking at this big rack back in the camp on that gravel bar. I want to take just a brief moment because Hunter Jack has some information to share with you about 60-Inch Club, and you're going to be amazed.
Hey there, friends. Meet Alaskan Hunter Jack. We're excited to share that the 60-Inch Club channel is thriving with over 1,760,000 views each month. Our YouTube channel alone brings in 355,855 views and over 5,600 hours of watch time. On Facebook, we're reaching over 342,000 views and 5,500 watch hours every month. And on Instagram, we touch the hearts of more than 1.1 million people every 28 days with around 976,000 views monthly. That adds up to over 1,797,000 views each month. How amazing is that? We'd love for you to check out our Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube links to explore some truly inspirational content.
Wasn't that cool? Now let's get back to the podcast. And we were kind of having some fun. Were we having fun with Jeff? Because he had some weird calls that he was doing, like, and we were kind of cracking up a little bit because we hadn't heard that kind of calling before.
What I remember was Jeff was still in bed and you and I got up and went out and we were getting ready to go hunt, and we were sitting there loading up our stuff and kind of getting stuff ready. And I think we were at one of the planes, and you were the one that had the call that was kind of like funny or whatever. And I don't know who had the funny call, but we were making fun of someone, and I heard a bull off in the distance, and I was like, Troy, do you hear that? And you were like, hear what? I don't hear anything. And I'm like, Troy, I think that there's a bull across the river. And that was kind of this funny thing when I was like, Troy, trying to point it out to you, because I don't think you could hear it. And really what was happening that morning is that bull was coming in and responding to us messing around.
Yeah.
And he was coming in on a string. And he, then once you did hear him, we was like, holy cow, let's get set up. And we were literally right in camp.
Yeah.
And so I can remember the bull actually, working his way down the river. He came out and he was in the open. We could see him. And then you and I started to have a discussion about how big the bull was. And we were, going back and forth. Is he 60 inches? Is he 50 inches? And we were trying to kind of judge him from across the river. In the meantime, he's super responsive. The light was coming up. It was super perfect. It was over the shoulder. And
it was perfect.
And as that bull started to enter into the river, I'm like, if this bull comes across the river, this is going to be epic footage. And there's no way I'm not going to shoot this bull. Yeah. And that bull came in, he crossed the river, and he ended up 20 yards away, I think, maybe. He was like it would have been super epic if we were bow hunting, but we weren't bow hunting. We were rifle hunting. We had one rifle in camp for everyone. That was it. We were all sharing the same gun.
It was the tattoo, yeah, the proof research, wasn't it?
The proof researcher. And so we kind of moved around. That bull came up in some brush from what I recall, and I had a super clear shot, and I basically shot him right behind the ear at 20 yards. And he just dropped like lights out, like crazy.
Lights out.
And then I turned to you on the camera, and I used the term, I whispered in his ear, because of that Whisper Tech can that we were basically testing. I mean, they were still prototypes, and they were still in production and so on. And so that became a thing, the whispering in the ear, right? So shooting them behind the ear became a thing.
And it was a Whisper technology that helped me, or helped you as the shooter, because my ears weren't ringing, your ears weren't ringing after the shot, because that canister kind of projects that big bang down.
It's
50 yards in front of you.
Well, it's that the acoustic signature, like your hearing protection is a huge part of hunting suppressed. I mean, that's a major advantage for sure. But yeah, I mean, it was like, non-impactful to either of us. And, but, I guess just on the cuff, turning and saying I whispered in his ear, that was a play on the fact that we had shot that bull suppressed. And then from what I recall, that's when Jeff came over. And
this bull grunt going on and on and on. And it finally dawned on me, there's no way Troy is bull grunting that long. And I cleaned things up, come over here, and I'm like, my God, he's coming right into camp.
And he was like, I heard all this calling going on, this commotion. And, I can't believe you guys, he came out at some point and he saw that bull, and he could hear the bull and see him across the river. And he's like, oh my gosh, this thing's going to come straight into camp. And that's what he did. And we actually shot that bull right on the gravel bar that we were camped on, which was the best pack out ever. Right. It was like
Literally
unbelievable.
I mean,
Yeah.
we butchered them up, and right there's the plains within 50 yards or less. And we just put them on some logs until we were ready to go.
Yeah.
Covered them up right on the gravel bar.
And then once we started to really look at the bull, and like we measured him, was like 63 inches. And we were like, wow, holy cow, I'm glad that we decided to harvest that bull. He was a lot bigger than we thought he was. And I think part of the dilemma there was his paddles were a little bit thinner at the base than what a normal 60-inch bull would be. And so it was somewhat a little bit deceiving.
That's what threw me off initially was, I like to gauge a bull by at least 10 inches of pan. And he eventually got into that 10 inches, but right at down towards the bottom, he wasn't the 10 inches that I felt that he was from, eyeballing him. But he obviously had a wider width between pan to pan than most of the bulls that I had already measured on the ground already. And they averaged between 27 and 34. And I think he was like 31, which made him even wider than anticipated, even though he was right at about the 10-inch mark for the width of the pans.
Yeah. Yeah. So he played a little bit of a trick on us, but the lighting, like the interaction, like everything else was like what you hope for.
That pack job was incredible. And you had this giant, biggest bull you've ever got at that time?
Yeah, by far. It was, I think I'd been up in Alaska 5 years or so at that point. And that was the biggest bull that I had killed up to that point for sure.
Yeah.
So I was super happy with that, super pleased with that. And I actually have that bull mounted as a 3/4 mount at my house. And so he's coming out of the wall. And after this hunt, I went and got on the hunt I was started on and ended up harvesting an interior grizzly. And that interior grizzly's mounted with that bull. They're squared off against each other. But yeah, he's a super significant part of the man cave, so to speak, still to this day.
So then again, we had another night around the campfire, and we're totally just stoked and telling jokes and talking about bear country, and and you brought up something at this time that I kind of really have thought about ever since, and it was about Kryptek. And you had mentioned what started the drive in you and Josh about how you felt you could develop a better camouflage, or maybe that you could do a better, you knew that you could do something better within the realm of camouflage. And how did that, am I anywhere close to how that came about with you?
Well, it started off with the gear first. That was the real inspiration, was just seeing the improvements during the War on Terror. There was lots of improvements, and a lot of those improvements were in apparel, and they were being driven, by the grind of combat. And there was mass improvements in everything from radio communications to weapon systems to apparel. And so when we saw a lot of those improvements in apparel, some of those made super great sense to be in the civilian hunting market. And that was the original real idea behind Kryptek. The camo aspect of it, when we first got going, we didn't have our own camo, and we were using another camo pattern called Mothwing Mountain Mimicry. But we had some, inspiration to do our own camouflage pattern someday. That was the goal. And then we were really super intrigued with camo netting, because that was the most, effective camo that we had seen on the battlefields, whether it was Afghanistan or Iraq. And so the idea was to roll that inspiration into, our own camo that could be printed on fabric. And when the U.S. Army Camo Improvement effort came out, it kind of accelerated our, I guess, ambition and motivation to go develop our own camo patterns. So that was kind of where we landed. And this was around the same time as the hunt, as you mentioned. But we had, developed new camo patterns, put them into the U.S. Army camo improvement effort. And ultimately we were down selected with the final 4 companies. We were one of the final 4 companies that went through, incredible rigorous testing. And to this day, we can still say that we're the only camouflage that's in the civilian hunting market that has been extensively tested by the Department of Defense and then selectively used by both U.S. and coalition special operations. But camo wasn't the original real catalyst. The real original catalyst was to just take these, improvements and features and functions that were going to keep you in the field longer, keep you warm, keep you dry, keep you cool when it's hot, those types of things, and the systems that were being integrated. So that was the real original motivation to go spiral those improvements that had been made in combat and bring them into the hunting market.
That was the first time that I had seen where somebody had put in the plastic knuckles over the hands for combat fighting, and the knee, plastic knee cups that go inside your knee if you're going to be crawling around and whatever combat's going to throw at you.
The knee system was a big deal. Up until then, that was not in play in the hunting market. And we came out with that super strong, super hard. And then of course, the other brands and competitors adapted that and that type of thing. The knuckle proof, impact proof on the knuckle, that was definitely a combat thing. And I mean, application in the hunting market, I mean, that was super nice. Like when you're in sheep country and you're basically navigating through rock and stuff like that. But more so than not, I mean, it's not really super game changing, but the knee systems and the waist systems and the adjustments, those were definitely game changing. Up until that time, guys that were sheep hunting were using, knee systems that they bought at Lowe's or Home Depot that you would buy to roof your house and put them on over the top of their pants,
Or the carpet layer type podcast, because Kryptek really has something cool to show you. You're going to love this. I told you that was cool. Now let's get back to the podcast. I was in Desert Storm myself in the Air Force. Did you know that?
I think you told me that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was over there. I've seen how it used to be and how dry it can be. And I've seen some torrential rainstorms, but I've always wanted to ask you, when you came out with the camouflage, it looks so much to me like after a rainstorm, you get this mud that it's just mud. And then the sun starts to bake it. And then it starts to do this orange peel. But then there's all these little hundreds of circles around this orange peel thing. And your camouflage has always reminded me of that. Mud.
Well, I've heard of all kinds of inspirations. Guys have said moth wings, they've said snake skin, they've said so on, but really the inspiration was the hexagons that are in camo netting that get distorted and that fabric's woven in and out, back and forth, and it takes on a 3-dimensional aspect. So, and that's been utilized for a long time. Guys would take netting and stretch it over their rifle or their scope, and then they would rattle can and kind of just to break up the outlines of the substrate. So, but that was the real inspiration. Super simple, really. Mm-hmm. I mean, the camo netting is really the most effective concealment measure on the battlefield, next to a ghillie suit. So to duplicate that though and take that effect and put it on a flat surface on fabric is the challenge, right? And so that's what we took on and we were able to accomplish. Of course, when you're moose hunting, it can be argued whether that's a time where you need to be, camo is important or not because of their vision. But for sure, when you start hunting sheep or antelope or any what I call a tier 1 undulant, and especially when you're bow hunting, that does play a factor, and it does make a difference for sure.
With the Dall sheep that we went on prior to this, and the pictures that we took, it was, you just couldn't see any of us walking around those rocks. So some incredible camouflage you came up with.
Well, Highlander in general is just crazy effective for Alaska. It's unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, it's incredible. I've lost several pieces of gear in Alaska, setting it down and walking away from it.
Can't find it again.
That's right.
So after you take that beautiful 63.5-inch bull, you and Jeff started kind of messing with me a little bit about, how I had to flip my hat up, and your rendition of me was quite comical. I see it in video footage I have, in my archive, and it's hilarious that what you and Jeff were kind of giving me a hard time about, because I couldn't hear that bull coming in.
Yeah, you thought that I was absolutely full of shit. I was like, Troy, do you hear that bull? And you're like,
Troy Sessions look. He's like, what?
Why
did he just like this? He goes, her lips call his
looking around, and you couldn't hear him, but he was grunting so low, and you had, I'll give you that you had your beanie over your ears to start with and that type of thing, but it wasn't really like super noticeable, right at the time. But then you did hear him. But it was funny, the reaction, because I think that maybe you thought I was joking with you, like screwing with you. Like,
I did.
Hey, dude, do you hear that bull? Do you hear that bull? Ha ha ha. And he would literally was only probably when he first started calling, I bet you that he was within 500 yards to start with. And then he closed the distance pretty fast and came in like on a string. And then once he committed to crossing the river, dude, that's when I was like, that was the barrier. Like, if he hadn't crossed the river, I probably wouldn't have pulled the trigger.
Right.
But as soon as he stepped into the river, I was like, there is no way that thing is going to come all the way over here. There is no way. And what a gift, man. I can't pass this gift up, but I'll be scrutinized if I don't shoot him. Like, are you kidding me? You didn't shoot that bull. Look he's way over 60 inches and you didn't shoot him right in camp. What kind of idiot are you? So, as soon as he stepped into the water, I was committed. I was like, yeah, this is going to be, I'm filling this tag right here.
You could literally, I mean, if I'm looking at the moose in front of us here, when you finally had him sign the guest book, I put my hand out to the right here. Our tent was probably 15 yards.
Yeah. It was right in camp. Like literally in camp.
Yeah.
That's what this storybooks are written about. Like, hey, remember that one time we called that bull into camp and we shot him right there by the fire? It was so awesome. No, that was crazy. And really it was right on top of each other. Like you're saying, like we had just gotten Jeff's bull back to camp the night before. We'd gotten up, we were going to cross the river and go back up on that plateau and call on that big vast opening up
on
there,
that
not
ridge
opening,
there.
but you could see. And that's what we were getting ready to do is we were loading up the Pro Pioneer, I think it was, to cross the river. And that's when that bull started to grunt and call, and we kind of had a change of plans right then and there. So that was super awesome. And we had all day at that point, right? Like that became like,
and it was a beautiful day.
Yeah, I can remember caping that bull out and just, taking my time, and there was no sense of urgency.
I just want to pause for a moment because I have some statistics here from Alaska that you're going to want to be aware of. The DIY hunters in Alaska, both the resident and the non-resident hunters, only have a 21% chance of success. Now, that's not average. That's the max. That's what is happening in Alaska. If you're coming to Alaska and you've just spent an enormous amount of money to come up here, realize that half of 21% is 10.5, and that means you only have a 10.5% chance of being successful on your moose hunt here in Alaska. Department of Fish and Game has been doing this survey for a long time. You can go into their website and look at it. And it's 21% average for all DIY hunters. Again, that includes both non-resident and resident. So cut that in half, and you got 10.5% chance. And that's every single year. Only 10.5% of all the DIY hunters coming to Alaska are successful. That's it. And I feel for you guys that have spent enormous amount of money coming to Alaska to be successful on a moose hunt, a hunt of a lifetime, knowing you only have a 10.5% chance for success. You have an 89.5% chance of failure after spending all that money. So what are you waiting for? And did I mention you can download all my courses on your phone, take them with you out in the field, and when you're sitting there in camp and you're pondering over what is wrong, what can I do to make this hunt more successful, at your leisure, around the fire, and watch my training courses and go, oh, we haven't tried that yet. Oh, my moose call is a little bit off. I better do it like this. Oh yeah, we can take the raft and go upriver and find that. And it's all right there. And I can't wait to give you some one-on-one training. All right, let's get back to the podcast.
From what I recall at that point, we were like done. Like we were like, okay, we've got 2 bulls. We need to get out of here. And I made some phone calls on the sat phone back to some friends in Fairbanks, and they were going to meet us at Pump Station 5 to basically shuttle meat back there so they could haul 2 bulls to town. And beautiful day. And that was the plan. And we had everything lined out. And from what I recall, as the evening progressed, the weather started to come in and started to get like really low ceilings, and it was raining, and it became like a hunker down type scenario. And so we weren't flying out like the next morning. And that night we sat around the campfire and we told stories and, basically had a good time, drank some bourbon, and we called a lot from camp. And I can remember that I know for sure it rained all night because I slept so good with that rain hitting the tent. We were in an Arctic oven, and super comfortable tent, the only tent you should have if you're in the bush in Alaska. And I just remember the next morning, pretty early, just barely shooting light. And we weren't planning on hunting, of course. And I remember you sticking your head in, and now I thought you were screwing with me because of the day before. And you're like, hey, there's a bull out here. Come on. There's a bull out here. And I'm like, what? You're full of crap.
Guys wouldn't get up. And I was calling that morning, and, traditionally when people tag out, they sleep in the next day, and especially after some bourbon. And
okay, so what's going on here? It's the next day now. After Butch got his big bull, coming across the river, and we got that thing all quartered up. Kind of a sign of success is the person getting the bulls still in the sleeping bag asleep right now. Well, Jeff and Butch are both snoozing right now and can't even get them up. They just won't get up at all. They're just like cooked. So I'm the only one left with the tag, so obviously I'm up and excited and trying to call in a big bull. I'm pretty hopeful it's going to be bigger than both of theirs. Had to get the small ones out of the way before I can get the big ones to come in. So I got coffee brewing, and it's kind of raining outside. And these guys are in here just, you can't get them up.
So I'm the only one that hasn't filled my tag, and I'm up drinking coffee and walking out there and calling and just doing what I love to do in the mornings, and that's call right from camp. And then finally it was like, I'm hearing something, and that's when I was like, you better get up. There's something coming. A bull's coming in.
Well, you have to remember again, though, we had committed like we were done.
Well,
like
I told
we're gonna fly out.
Yeah, I wasn't. I said I was not going to harvest a bull unless he was just a toad, because we were
Right.
tired already. 2
Right.
bulls down, processed, and I said unless he's a big one, I'm not going to shoot it because he
Right.
better be
So
huge.
so I ended up actually, I like knew now you're serious, right? Like, hey, he's not joking around. Okay, so I jump up and you're like, I still have a tag here, and you hand me the camera. And this is old school, dude. This is like, these cameras were like this. This was like, the one you put on your shoulder
Yeah,
type camera,
it was a
And
pretty serious camera back then, but now it's old.
well, it is. But I had no idea how to operate it. And you're like, just push this button, and this button goes in and out. And I'm like, okay. And then he calls again, and you're like, he's coming, so let's hurry. And we scurry down the riverbank, and I'm like right behind you, and I'm filming Blair Witch, I'm sure. And that bull steps out on the other side of the river, and that's when I knew it was real, because for you to be impressed, you were like, oh my gosh, this thing is a toad.
Yep.
And he dropped into the river super shallow on our side, but he crossed, and then he turned 90 degrees to his full broadside.
Yep.
And I'm filming, and it's not the best film because it's actually the very first time I've ever filmed anything like this. Like, literally, I had the camera in my hand less than 5 minutes.
Yeah, but
Like,
you
this
did
is
great.
this is my first time ever. All I can remember is like, just make sure that red record button's on. Just make sure that red record button's on. And so we kind of hand railed him down a little bit. And then I remember when you shot him in the same spot I shot my bull, right behind the ear. The difference was, instead of him dropping, he stood up on his hind legs, and he was like 12 feet in the air, and then rocked over onto his side and crashed into the water.
Amazing.
And then I'm pretty sure you turned to me and said the same thing. You're like, I whispered in his ear.
I did.
So now we had 3 bulls down in camp.
Yeah.
And this bull was by far the biggest. Like, this was incredible, right?
Well, he had, Jeff's was the widest at 71 and a half. But the density and the thickness of the antlers and the pans were more massive. I mean, if you were to weigh the bulls, I probably had, I don't know, another 5-8 pounds of mass on his antlers than maybe Jeff's had.
He just looked, the fronts were just like these incredible, like, trash can lids. Mm-hmm. I can't remember, like, they were like seats that you could sit in. They were just, the fronts were just obnoxiously huge.
And then he had those daggers that stuck out that, they looked like a knife or like a sword that were really just amazing.
Yeah. Incredible.
He was right at 70 when we measured him. Maybe even a snivvy. I don't know if you can, depend on who measured him. He was right at 70.
Didn't you think that bull was like 2 miles away? Didn't we think that bull was like, came 2 miles?
Yeah, we had seen him flying over at least 2 miles away up on a lake, and he had some cows with him.
Yeah.
And, they're not going to leave their cows usually. All I can really speculate here is that he serviced the cows, and maybe my calling technique was getting better at that time.
I think
had
the calling from that,
he
heard a party going down on the river. He's like, I got to get over there.
He did,
because we were all trying to call each other that night, and obnoxiously amount of calling. I'm sure that, like, nobody in their right mind would stay up all night calling every 3 minutes, but that's what brought him in the next morning, right at first light, right at shooting light, right?
Yep.
And that was so epic, man. It was incredible.
That was, and the footage turned out pretty good, and you got him on. The lighting wasn't good, but then when it was overcast, and you can't get the best. At least you got him in the frame, and you got me in there, and it just turned out perfect.
You know what I realized right then is, like, if you're a camera guy, it's just as exciting as being the shooter or the hunter. And for me, I was like excited for you, right? Mm-hmm. And that was a first for me. I've felt that way since, specifically when I've hunted with my daughters. I get more excited hunting with my family, my wife and my daughters, than I do for myself behind the gun. But there was this other like sense of involvement, like, you know, you're a part of the hunt in a different fashion, capturing it. And I was just glad that we got it on film. But monumental, like super monumental. I don't know how common that is, if it's been duplicated again or not, but what a monumental hunt that was. So that, you think about that, you guys had come out, I think, one day, and we went back in. So in a matter of 4 days, maybe, that was 3 bulls. If you were to put them all on the map and mark their location where they were shot, your bull and my bull would have been easily within 100 yards. We shot them basically both on the same gravel bar, one on one end, one on the other. And then Jeff's bull, they were all, I'm sure, within 500 yards.
No, I would think Jeff's bull was only 150 yards from the bank inland across the river.
Yeah, so it was a few hundred yards.
Maybe, yeah, at most a few hundred yards between. If you had a triangle of each of them where they hit the ground, it was probably 250 to 300 yards. I'm thinking. Yeah, I want you to envision calling in a giant bull moose and having that bull respond to you by looking right at you after you called, maybe a nice cow call. And those big, huge antlers looking at you, and then here he comes like he's on a tether cord. And the feeling that you're going to have. Next thing you know, your heartbeat is pounding harder, you're breathing harder, and the adrenaline is pumping. Now, for me, that happens every single year. I call in moose like I did my friends here, calling in this giant bull moose at Caribou Lake and bringing in the bull. And then I'd grab the camera and film my friends shooting the bull. Or how about here, we're up on a ridge, at Trophy Ridge, matter of fact. I called in this giant bull from a mile away. He stands up, and here he comes on a tether cord. I grabbed the camera again, and I filmed my buddy Jeff harvest his first giant bull moose. That bull ended up being 71.5 inches, and Jeff had never even taken a bull over 40. Or how about my other friend here? I called in this giant 60-inch bull moose to my friend, grabbed the camera, and I start filming here. This can be you. You can take 30 years of my experience and learn how to do this in a matter of 4 or 5 hours. Or how about the moose I called in for Lat Durance of Best of the West? We're on top of this ridge. I lay out a bunch of cow calls, and I'm calling this bull in. I'm grabbing the camera, I'm filming, dropping the camera, calling some more, and then I pick up the camera and I film Lat Durance from Best of the West take this ginormous 65-inch bull moose down on the river bottom there from vantage point up above, all from calling. That's all I did. Called. I am going to be giving free online training courses to the first 20 people who click the link below and fill out the registration form, and 20 of you are going to get that for free. I can't wait to see you all in here. This is my first ever live moose hunting training courses Q&A program, where I'm going to answer a lot of questions for all of you people. Hit the link below or in the description or even in the comment section. This is pretty neat. I think you're going to love it. 14, 18 inches wide. I'm going to pick it up. Try to. What do you think of that? Now that's a bull. I told you that was cool. Now let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah, they were right. It was the same gravel bar, man. So the other thing that is a highlight of that hunt that I think you should try to capture is getting in and out from a pilot perspective. And so listeners know, I was a military pilot, right? You guys getting in on that sandbar was nothing short of like impressive. Like, wow. It was impressive. And, you know, I got to see you guys take off and land, and I filmed, I know for sure, some of it.
Yeah. First moose about ready to be flown out. And so a lot of weight on these planes, short takeoff, So let's see how it goes, and I think we'll be all right. Find out here soon, huh? There we go. One moose out of camp on its way back to Fairbanks. And left me here alone with the other moose and the bears. So we'll see what happens.
But coming in, dragging the wheels to get your airspeed slowed down, and then actually, landing short on that sandbar. There was a reason why we were able to, hunt those moose, is because of the skill sets that you and Jeff had as pilots to get in there. Because not everybody would do what you, or be able to do what you guys were doing.
No, it's true. Airstrip. I mean, we absolutely did a lot of practicing and implemented some really neat skills into what we were. It started off with horseplay, and might even, some pilots would consider foolish, but in the tens of maybe 100 hours of dragging tires on the river out in front of Fairbanks, on the Tanana and other rivers, and getting a feel for how that works. And then, lots of flying. Now it's time to go off-road. We're going to tuck the planes away. Doing it, practicing, and then you get into a region a couple 100 miles away from town, and you see ginormous bulls in these small gravel bars, and you just really can't not try to see if you can tickle your tires and get in on a 400-foot gravel bar and maybe get a shot at those big bulls like that, obviously the next day. But yeah, it all stemmed from having a passion and a love to fly. And then, I watched a lot of videos, and me and Jeff both did, and went over and practiced, and a lot of tickling the tires and short field landings. And then we had been doing it for many years in one of my other locations. So we were used to doing it, and we knew what we were looking at to make it safe. And for me and Jeff, I mean, what looked to be epic at one point at that, when you've seen it, but we'd done that couple hundred times. Hey Butch, how you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Good to see you.
He's a fellow adrenaline junkie, so I'm sure he'd have felt a little better if he was flying.
That was
especially in my Jurassic Park area that I have, it's similar.
Oh, it was impressive for sure. It was super impressive.
Coming from a pilot, and not only that, but you flew Apaches, is that correct? Helicopters?
Yep. Yeah, I flew Apache attack helicopters.
And that's amazing combat scenarios that, I mean, it's one thing to ice skate, but to play hockey, that's a whole nother league. But so with you and military, you're not just flying a helicopter and having fun. I mean, it was like your life depended on it when you're out there in the field.
Well, it was a lot of fun too. I mean, I do miss pulling the trigger on ripping Hellfires and 2.75 inch rockets and 30 millimeter. But it was the most, lethal weapons platform at that time on the battlefield. But you are getting shot back at. That does make a difference. It makes a huge difference. And you're also, putting fires precisely and surgically on the ground to shape the battlefield for the maneuver elements on the ground. So it is, it's for real. It's not playtime at all. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's very much like hunting. At least it was when I was in Afghanistan and Iraq, except you're getting shot back at, and you got a super sophisticated, quarry that you're after. So
right, which leads to we had 3 moose on the ground, all processed, blood in the air, all over that gravel bar. Jeff had a friend that was an area biologist in that area for 25 years. And he said that the bears in that region, these were inland grizzly bears. These bears aren't eating salmon. They're these rivers chock full of salmon, and there's food around every bend. These bears got to hunt for their food. And that biologist told Jeff that this area had some of the meanest grizzly bears in the region because they have to fend for food, unlike
So now we are dealing with what we potentially think are bears, and it's obvious that why, and that's part of hunting in Alaska, but these are grizzly bears, and they're not something to be messed with, and it's dark, and so we're all geared up. We've all got, the proper protection.
We're also in an area, Troy, that a good friend of mine has been a game biologist for almost 30 years, and according to him, one of the biggest, nastiest grizzly bears in the entire state of Alaska we're in their backyard right now, so we do need to be situationally aware and ready to respond.
Bear infested, it just makes it that much higher of an adventure, right?
We were combat ready with in case the bear did show up that night or the next morning, and nothing did. And
we totally expected it, though. We were like, hey, we need to be ready because we're going to have bears in camp here. This is just, we've been here too long.
Yep.
There's too much scent. That's going to be the next part of this story. But fortunately, we didn't have to have a situation where they came in and messed our tent up or our planes up or anything.
Right.
Our cache, our meat cache.
I just want to touch on what you mentioned just a little bit earlier. And I'm gonna chime in on this as well. I've never heard of any hunters, any guiding unit, anybody, or 3 hunters going out into the field and taking not only 2 70-inch bulls, which is unheard of, but an additional 63. So 3 bulls in 4 days, within 5 days, on one given hunt. Have you?
No, that's why I'm saying it was so remarkable. I mean, It was pretty epic to do that, like over the period of a couple of years, or maybe one season in multiple places. But to do that in one season on one hunt that started off really with like, hey, help me come up and pack out my 71-inch bull that I shot. That's how it all started. That was the whole thing that just, turned into this incredible experience, like once in a lifetime experience.
That's what people don't understand when I read some of the comments is that, oh, you're trophy hunting. And I'm like, no, we were just 3 buds going out to go hunt, and it just, everything came into play and worked out perfect for us. And it was an epic hunt. And you actually named the hunt. You said this hunt was epic. Around the campfire.
No, absolutely. I said it was this hunt was epic. And then that's how we referred to that hunt forever. I mean, and that's how I used to refer to it as well. Was a epic moose hunt. I mean, it was nothing short of incredible, and epic probably is like, even doesn't do it justice, to say the least. I mean, especially if you've chased moose and you like what it's like to take a trophy bull, let alone 3 trophy bulls in one hunt with good friends, and just that it's just like friends going out and filling the freezer. We want to take good mature bulls. We want to take we want to shoot bulls that are around that 60-inch mark. And then to have what happened to us, it was incredible. It was phenomenal.
Incredible. And I want to put a little shout out for the late Jeff Wall, our buddy and old time pastor of Friends Church there in Fairbanks, and he's going to be missed. He's not with us anymore, but he sure impacted our lives with his sermons and his preaching and his love for God.
Yes, he did. That's for sure.
And I feel really blessed as well to get him on film and be able to watch this hunt with Jeffrey Wall, and because that's what you always called him, was Jeffrey. You never just said Jeff, you know. And he was such a great guy.
Yep, he'll dearly missed. That's for sure. I know that he held that hunt that we all got to share in high regard. That's for sure.
He did.
Well, hey, we moved camp. We are not settling for 50-inch bulls. I mean, that's not why we came out here. So Troy did a little more scouting this morning, and a friend of mine has been a game biologist for almost 30 years, and according to him, one of the biggest, nastiest grizzly bears in the entire state of Alaska we're in their backyard right now, so we do need to be situationally aware and ready to respond in case they're hungry.
We probably want to stay just to the right of these, Troy. With that kind of tailwind, it's going to be pretty violent updrafts. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. So we'll hang up to the north side of that mountain range so we don't get any updraft or trouble with that wind. Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
We're going to miss our spot. Uh-oh. Something we did the first service with this song, and we sing these words, you know, you're my dancing rhythm, and you know, for a lot of us guys, that's a little bit of a stretch, you know. I don't know. I won't ask you to admit the last time you came dancing out of the shower and you were telling Jesus you loved him or something, you know, cool like that. But I think we miss it though, and we don't understand that God wants our praise from our heart, and it's not about these guys singing to us. As cool as that is, they're worshiping Jesus, and Jesus is looking for worship from you. And the reality is that he poured his blood out for your sin. He was on the cross for you. And so God isn't looking for anything fancy. He's just looking for something from the heart. And even if it's for you, as we go through this one more time, it's just in your heart singing your own words to him. They're just going to play a little instrumental for a minute, but just in your mind. Some of you can sing it out loud. And for some of you, you can do that, and we'll even appreciate it. Some of you will just know that Jesus loves that, you know. But he does. He loves it, and he longs for it, and he deserves it. And so from your heart, just tell him you love him. Tell him you appreciate him. Will you do that? You might help just to close your eyes. Just forget about your neighbor. Lord Jesus, I just want to tell you I love you. And you're not some faraway God to me. You ride around in the clouds, but you live inside my heart. And you can do that because you did pour your blood out. You cleansed me of my sin. So Jesus, I love you. Bless your name. Bless your name. Just worship him in your heart. Worship him out loud. Just tell him you love him. I love you, Lord. Lift up our thanks this morning to you. Grateful for your love, grateful for your goodness, grateful for your mercy toward us, the grace that sustains us from day to day. Thank you, Jesus. Oh, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Let's sing that one more time. You poured out all your blood.
Poured out all your blood, you died upon the cross. You are my Jesus who loves me. You poured out all your blood, you died upon the cross. You are my Jesus who loves me.
Bless you. You may be seated.